Yo, we're back with the next part of the Warrior Ethos. In the book, it's part 3, Inner Wars. Chapter 21, Casualties of War. All of us know brothers and sisters who have fought with incredible courage on the battlefield, only to fall apart when they came home. Why? Is it easier to be a soldier than to be a civilian? For the warrior, all choices have consequences. His decisions have meanings. Every act he takes is significant. What he says and does can save or cost his own life or the lives of his brothers. The 19-year-old squash leader and the 23-year-old lieutenant often exercise more power and in spheres of greater and more instant consequence than their fathers, who are 50 and have been working honorably and diligently their entire lives. Is adrenaline addictive? Is the fight? Are these tools of combat hellish, as they may feel in the moment, the best years of our lives? Chapter 22, The Civilian World. Spartans and Romans and Macedonians, Persians and Mongols, Apache and Seo, Maasai and Samurai and Pashtun, all share one advantage over us Americans. They were, and are, warrior cultures embedded within warrior societies. This is not the case in the United States. The American military is a warrior culture embedded within a civilian society. This state is, in the American view, highly desirable. A too strong military, unfettered by civilian restraint, might be inclined to adventurism or worse. No citizen disputes this or wishes to set up things in any other way. The Joint Chiefs answer to Congress and to the President, and ultimately to the American people. This is the state that the Constitution intended, and that the Founding Fathers, who were rightly wary of unchecked concentrations of power, had in mind. But it is an interesting state, and one that produces curious effects. First, the values of the warrior culture are not necessarily shared by the societies at large. In fact, many of their values are opposites. Civilian society prizes individual freedom. Each man and woman is at liberty to choose his or her own path. Rise or fall, do whatever he or she wants, so long as it doesn't impinge on the liberty of others. The warrior culture, on the other hand, values cohesion and obedience. The soldier or sailor is not free to do whatever he wants. He serves. He is bound to perform his duty. Civilian society rewards wealth and celebrity. Military culture prizes honor. Aggression is valued in a warrior culture. In civilian life, you can go to jail for it. A warrior culture trains for adversity. Luxury and ease are the goals advertised to the civilian world. Sacrifice, particularly shared sacrifice, is considered an opportunity for honor in a warrior culture. A civilian politician doesn't dare utter the word. Selflessness is a virtue in a warrior culture. Civilian society gives lip service to this, while frequently acting as selfishly as it possibly can. It is healthy for a society to entrust its defense to 1% of its population, while the other 99% thanks its lucky stars that it doesn't have to do the dirty work. In ancient Sparta, and in the other cultures cited, a warrior culture, the army, existed within a warrior society, the community itself. No conflict existed between the two. Each supported and reinforced the other. Remember the stories about the Spartan mothers? When the 300 were chosen to march out and die at Thermopylae, there was weeping and wailing in the streets of Sparta by the wives and mothers of the warriors who were not chosen. The wives of the 300 walked out dry-eyed and proud. 150 years later, Demosthenes, the great Athenian orator, delivered a series of speeches in the assembly on this very subject. Willing sacrifice by all. The orations were called Philippics because they warned Athens against the rise of Philip of Macedonia. Alexander's father, whose ambition was clearly to bring all of Greece under its heel. Men of Athens, Will you send your sons to contest this monster, Philip? Or have you grown so fat and happy that you cannot, and dispatch instead hired troops who are not of our blood or kin? Will these mercenaries, who fight only for profit, possess the will to hold Philip back? Or will the day come when we awake to discover that we have ceded future liberty to current ease? The greatness of American society, like its Athenian progenitor, is that it is a civilian society. Freedom and equality are the engines that produce wealth, power, culture, and art, and unleash the greatness of the human spirit. What is the place of the warrior ethos within a greater civilian society? That question has been asked from the days of the Minutemen through World War II, Greatest Generation, to Vietnam, and today, the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. The greatness of American society is that our citizens are still debating it, protected by those who have freely chosen to embrace the warrior ethos, and still debating it freely. Chapter 23, Coming Home. But what about us? What about the soldier or marine who steps off the plane from overseas and finds himself in the scariest place he's seen in years? Home. Has everything he knows suddenly become useless? What skill set can he employ in the civilian world? The returning warrior faces a dilemma, not unlike that of the convict released from prison. Has he been away so long that he can never come back? Is the world he knows so alien to the real world that he can never fit in again? Who is he if he's not a warrior? The answer may not be as far away as he supposes. The returning warrior may not realize it, but he has acquired an MBA in enduring adversity and a PhD in resourcefulness, tenacity, and the capacity for hard work. He may find that the warrior skills he has acquired are exactly what he and his family need, and more, that these skills possess the capacity to lift him and sustain him through the next stage of his life, and through every succeeding stage. The warrior remains the same, only the field has changed. The returning warrior possesses the warrior ethos, and this is a mighty ally in all spheres of endeavor. Chapter 24, Purity of the Weapon. The civilian sometimes misconstrues the warrior code. He takes it to be one of simple brutality. Overpower the enemy, show no mercy, win at all costs. But the warrior ethos commands that brute aggression be tempered by self-restraint and guided by moral principle. Soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, who often must fight against enemies who target civilians, who strike from or stockpile weapons within houses of worship, and who employ their own women and children as human shields, are taught to act according to the principle called Tokar ha-neshek, purity of the weapon. This derives from 2 verses in the Old Testament. What it means is that the individual soldier must reckon himself. What is the moral use of this weapon, and what is the immoral use? When an action is unjust, the warrior must not take it. Alexander, in his campaigns, always looked beyond the immediate clash to the prospect of making today's foe into tomorrow's ally. After conquering an enemy in the field, his first act was to honor the courage and sacrifice of his antagonists, and to offer the vanquished warriors a place of honor within his own cause. By the time Alexander reached India, his army had more fighters from the ranks of his former enemies than from those of his own Greeks and Macedonians. Cyrus of Persia believed that the spoils of his victories were meant for one purpose, so that he could surpass his enemies in generosity. I contend against my foes in this arena only, the capacity to be of greater service to them than they are to me. Alexander operated by the same principle. Let us conduct ourselves so that all men wish to be our friends and all fear to be our enemies. The capacity for empathy and self-restraint will serve us powerfully, not only in our external wars, but in the conflicts within our own hearts. Chapter 25. The war inside ourselves. The Bhagavad Gita is a great warrior epic of India. For thousands of years, Indian caste structure has been dominated by two elite social orders: the Brahmins, poets and holy men, and the Kshatriyas, warriors and nobles. The Bhagavad Gita is the story of the great warrior Arjuna, who receives spiritual instruction from his charioteer, who happens to be Krishna, i.e. God in human form. Krishna instructs Arjuna to slay his enemies without mercy. The warrior god points across the battlefield to knights and archers and spearmen, whom Arjuna knows personally and feels deep affection for, and commands him to kill them all. But here's the interesting part. The names of these enemy warriors in Sanskrit can be read two ways. They can be simply names, or they can represent inner crimes or personal vices, such as greed, jealousy, selfishness, and the capacity to play our friends false, or to act without compassion towards those who love us. In other words, one warrior Arjuna is being instructed to slay the enemies inside himself. Human history, anthropologists say, can be divided into three stages: savagery, barbarism, and civilization. Warrior codes arose during the period known as High Barbarism. Many noble cultures fall under this category. From Native American tribes to Cyrus's Persians, to the Greeks and Trojans, made immortal in Homer's Iliad. The warrior ethos origins are primitive. Its genesis lies in the eye for an eye ethic of humanity's most ancient and primordial epochs. The Bhagavad Gita changes this. It takes the warrior ethos and elevates it to a loftier and noble place, the plane of the individual's inner life, to his struggle to align himself with his own high nature. Chapter 26. The Lord of Discipline. In the Gita, the warrior Arjuna is commanded to slay the foes that constitute his own baser being. That is, to eradicate those vices and inner demons that would sabotage his path to becoming his best and highest self. How is Arjuna instructed to do this? By the practice of self-discipline. In other words, by the interior exercise of his warrior ethos. Arjuna's divine instructor, one of whose titles in Sanskrit is the Lord of Discipline, charges his disciple to fix your mind upon its object, hold to this unswervingly, disowning fear and hope, advance only upon this goal. Here is the warrior ethos directed inward, employing the same virtues used to overcome external enemies, but enlisting these qualities now in the cause of the inner struggle, for integrity, maturity, and the honorable life. Chapter 27. A rite of passage. Why do young men and women in a free society enlist in the military? This act seems to defy common sense. Why volunteer for low pay, lame haircuts, and the chance to be killed, particularly in a society that rewards such behavior with little of more substance than a thank you for your service, or a yellow ribbon on a bumper sticker? Why do it? Why sign up? One answer may be that the young man or woman is seeking a rite of passage. When we enlist in the Army or Marine Corps, we're looking for a passage to manhood or womanhood. We have examined our lives in the civilian world and concluded perhaps that something's missing. Do we lack self-discipline, self-confidence? Do we feel stuck? Are we heading in the right direction? We want action. We want to test ourselves. We want friends, real friends, who will put themselves on the line for us. And we want to do the same for them. We're seeking some force that will hurl us out of our going nowhere lives and into the real world, into genuine hazard and risk. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves, something we can be proud of. And we want to come out of the process as different and better people than we were when we went in. We want to be men, not boys. We want to be women, not girls. We want a rite of passage. We want to grow up. One way to do that is to go to war. Young men have been undergoing that ordeal of initiation for 10,000 years. This passage is into and through what the great psychologist Carl Jung called the warrior archetype. Chapter 28, the warrior archetype. Jung was a student of myths and legends and of the unconscious. He discovered and named the collective unconscious, meaning that part of the psyche that is common to all cultures in all eras and at all times. The collective unconscious, Jung said, contains the stored wisdom of the human race, accumulated over thousands of generations. The collective unconscious is the software we're born with. It's our package of instincts and proverbial knowledge. Within this package, Jung discovered what he called archetypes. Archetypes are the larger-than-life, mythic-scale personification of the stages that we pass through as we mature. The youth, the lover, the wanderer, the joker, the king or queen, the wise man, the mystic. Legendary tales like that of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table are populated by archetypes. Movies are full of archetypes. Even the deck of cards has archetypes. King, queen, joker, jack. Archetypes serve the purpose of guiding us as we grow. A new archetype kicks in at each stage. It makes the new phase feel right and seem natural. One of the primary archetypes is the warrior. The warrior archetype exists across all eras and nations and is virtually identical in every culture. In their book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, authors Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette tell us that the human individual matures from archetype to archetype. A boy, for instance, evolves sequentially through the youth, the wanderer, the lover, the warrior, through husband and father to teacher, king, sage, and mystic. The warrior archetype clicks in like a biological clock, sometime into the early to mid-teens. We join a gang, we try out for a football team, we hang with our homies, we drive fast, we take crazy chances. We seek adventure and hazard. That'll change later. When the husband-father archetype kicks in, we'll trade our 500 horsepower Mustang and buy a Prius. But not yet. For now, the warrior archetype has seized us. Something inside us makes us want to jump out of airplanes and blow stuff up. Something that makes us seek out mentors, tough old sergeants to put us through hell, to push us past our limits, to find out what we're capable of. And we seek out comrades in arms, brothers who will get our backs and we'll get theirs, lifelong friends who are just as crazy as we are. Chapter 29. The Naked Wise Men. Moore and Gillette say something further. They state that the experiences and wisdom we accumulate under one archetype become the foundation for all the succeeding archetypes. In other words, the lessons we learn are not wasted. The virtues we acquire during our time in the warrior archetype we can use when we mature into the husband and father, the mentor, the king. We get to keep them and profit from them our whole lives. Alexander in India encountered some gymnosophist, literally a naked wise man, yogis, sitting in meditation in the sun on the banks of the Indus. Alexander's party was trying to get through the busy street, but the yogis had their spot and they wouldn't move. One of Alexander's zealous young lieutenants took it upon himself to chase the holy men out of the king's path. When one of the wise men resisted, the officer started verbally abusing him. Just then, Alexander came up. The lieutenant pointed to Alexander and said to the yogi, "This man has conquered the world. What have you accomplished?" The yogi looked up calmly and replied, "I have conquered the need to conquer the world." At this, Alexander laughed with approval. He admired the naked wise man. "Could I be any man in the world other than myself?" he said. Could I be any man in the world other than myself? He said, I would be this man here. What Alexander was acknowledging was that the yogi was a warrior too, an inner warrior. Alexander looked at him and thought, this man was a fighter when he was my age. He has taken the lessons he learned as a warrior, dueling external enemies, and is turning them to use now as he fights internal foes to achieve mastery over himself. Chapter 30. The hardest thing in the world. The hardest thing in the world is to be ourselves. Who are we? Our family tells us, society tells us, laws and customs tell us. But what do we say? How do we get to that place of self-knowledge and conviction where we are able to state without doubt, fear or anger, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is how I intend to live my life. How do we find our true calling, our soul companions, our destiny? In this task, our mightiest ally is the warrior ethos. Directed inward, the warrior ethos grounds us, fortifies us, and focuses our resolve. As warriors, we have been taught discipline. Now, we teach ourselves self-discipline. As fighting men and women, we have been motivated, commanded, and validated by others. Now, we school ourselves in self-motivation, self-command, self-validation. The warrior archetype is not the be-all and end-all of life. It is only one identity, one stage on the path to maturity. But it is the greatest stage, and the most powerful. It is the foundation upon which all succeeding stages are laid. Let us be then warriors of heart, and enlist in our inner cause the virtues we have acquired through blood and sweat in the sphere of conflict, courage, patience, selflessness, loyalty, fidelity, self-command, respect for elders, love for our comrades and of the enemy, perseverance, cheerfulness in adversity, and a sense of humor, however terse or dark. So that's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a fairly quick read, this one. So that's the Warrior Ethos. We'll be back with our next book probably the day after this. I think I've got the book lined up. It's a book written by an old samurai. The Book of Five Rings. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.